This is the Nebuchadnezzar on approach, requesting access through Gate 3.
Nebuchadnezzar, this is Zion Control. Maintain present velocity and stand by. The Nebuchadnezzar is down. Base 7.
Understood.
Zion was kind of a purposeful contrast to the minimalist contemporary vibe of the Matrix.
Zion's semi-retro kind of design that carries across from the almost Victorian period or the 30s of when they built the Bay Bridge or the Sydney Harbour Bridge, and big industrial kind of works. There's that kind of engineering quality.
Zion is the kind of society that is, in a way, a free society, a democratic society, where everyone inside that society understands and knows what their role is.
It's a world that is multi-ethnic, and primarily, I would say the majority of people are people of color.
I thought the representation of all the ethnic groups was just, you've never seen that in a science fiction movie at that capacity.
It's mostly like African American or Black and Hispanic and Asian and it's just a real mix of people that are non-white or Caucasian, which is what you usually see in most films.
So Zion, I think, is one of those rare occurrences in Hollywood where it reflects what I guess we're calling multiculturalism now.
We're standing in the sewer set. So this is kind of like at the very bottom of the S-bend. So if you imagine the S-bend in your bathroom down the bottom where all the rings and the crap ends up, this is it. You're at the very bottom of it, amongst all the Rio and the crap that's been washed down here over like 1,000 years. And we figured that at this point the world had got so successful because of the kind of underclass of machines, their slave class, they'd been able to have these big mega cities, and these big sewers were here to support those big cities. The whole sewer might have been made up of a whole lot of little pipes, which are still huge pipes, like the one on our left, my left here, is a huge pipe where, you know, maintenance vehicles and things like that can go. But it's a difficult set to kind of work in. I think it's a really difficult set for the crew. It's very tight, very confined, and as you can see, all are very strong. Have to be very strong to carry all these big pieces of concrete around. Zion's made up, if you like, of a landing area, which we call the dock, where all the ships, all the hovercraft come in and land, and it's a defence area for the population of Zion.
So I think the first drawing I did of the dock, I don't know, it took me 2.5, 3 weeks or something, because it was so labor-intensive and figuring out the perspective. And Owen had done like a schematic of what the basic shape and what the levels were, because it was almost like steps that would lead down to the main, like, sewer drain, if you want.
It's kind of like a huge septic tank that's been built into a landing base, where there's cranes and machinery and workshops for working on these hovercraft.
I put like a railroad track around it, because I kept thinking of, you know, have you ever seen like a railroad junction where all the trains come in? And I put that crane on top of the elevator. See, there's action, even when there is no action, there's movement.
And then you go down below the dock via elevators through bedrock where the command centre is, where Harmon has his office and Locke has his command centre. And then you go down below the command level, you go down into the bottomless pit. And it's like a giant sinkhole, and it's like 7,000 feet deep, which is where 250,000 people live.
It's good to be home.
We kind of set it up so that the people were above the council. A democracy, in that you had representatives there from each of the ships, or representatives from each level of the bottomless pit. So what we have suggested, without being too accurate, is that this structure, whoever built it, we've added a kind of patina of the centuries. We have a lot of rust. They used polystyrene and they laid it onto the floaters and they burnt it all with a heater. And you had this fantastic metal sense, because all of Zion's basically metal, there's no wood. So all the chairs that are in that set, they are all chairs out of the Merovingian's restaurant.
It was kind of a Colosseum kind of space to an extent, but basically it had to be all metal. So it felt like you were, contained in a tin can.
And then you go down below the council to the residence area. There are all these kind of faceless buildings where the residents of Zion live. And every 43 metres there's a major kind of level, and in between it there are 10 levels of houses ringing around this naturally formed sinkhole. There's a little model which is the extent of what we will build. It's all made of steel, it's quite structural. There'll be a green screen here and above it at each end, and the visual effects department will build this repetitive kind of design that it has around to create the illusion of the full kind of residence area.
It is this thrown together, makeshift world that these people have been forced to live in, and they made the best of a fairly terrible situation.
Where's my pussy? Hey! Hey! Get to see human ingenuity and how they built up, you know, this world that exists and as many of the conveniences that they could have. Loved it, and it was really great. Like, they had the food growing, the mushrooms. They were like really homey, like all these like handcrafted like little things. Like maybe they all put it together themselves.
So in the first film, everyone lived in a little red house on the outside of a big cylinder. And it was the power plant, you know, a pod. And in this film, everyone lives on the inside of a cylinder in a little red hole.
Basically, Zion, it's the power pods in reverse. Instead of projecting from a cylinder, they're living inside a cylinder. They've escaped from one environment to basically live in the same environment. Although they're free, and that's an important part of it.
At the bottom of Zion, there's a huge cave or cavern which the people of Zion use as a gathering place.
Here, Larry and Andy wanted to have the feeling of the natural earth, like we're going almost kind of like back to the womb. Something like a church or a big cathedral.
The super cool part about that particular space was creating it based off the pictures we found in National Geographic about massive underground caves and a lot of photographs of Bryce Canyon sort of rock formations.
The cave is probably half a mile long. Through the use of visual effects, John Gator and his team will increase the height of what we have built to 300 odd feet right in the center at its highest point. Luckily, it's got fabulous acoustics, so someone just whispering can be heard all the way down at the back end.
I give you more.
And then you go down below the caves and they'd have what's called the engineering.
The engine room was sort of beautiful, strangely beautiful, heavily detailed, and almost convoluted underground world. Effectively a steam energy plant that is where the, geothermal energy is derived to power up the city. We based some of those environments off of Jeff Darrow drawings.
Some of these drawings are like this big, and I'd have like this much done after a day.
My theory is that the machines purpose-built Zion for the human beings, but you have to have balance within the system so that you could have a matrix. Within that, there has to be a sense of freedom or rebellion, so you have to have a Zion.